I want to show you, I have no difficulty with the tonality. That's a really gross assumption. Let me actually show you what I can do. Oh, it's really easy for me. That's a really, I mean, that's a really nothing but a speculation.
The White House tries to sell a $2 trillion infrastructure plan, but skepticism of a deal is growing on both sides of the aisle. Lawmakers drawing a clear line in the sand during President Biden's first bipartisan get-together. My next guest was in yesterday's meeting at the White House. He is Republican Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi. He is the ranking member of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. Key in these negotiations. Senator, thanks so much for taking the time this morning.
Thank you, Jim. Glad to be with you.
So to your credit, you were in that meeting there, attempting a bipartisan approach to this. Before you went in, you said you were willing to negotiate, but you since said that any increase in taxes, corporate taxes, to pay for the plan is really a non-starter for Republicans. And I wonder, are you willing to negotiate on the issue of taxes?
Well, let me...
So, you know what, it's really easy. I understand the tonality really perfectly. Jim Sciutto actually said that President Joe Biden is very much willing to, at least, you know, do whatever it takes to pass this bill requiring $2.5 billion. You know, he's been very desperate for this, a $2.5 billion infrastructure plan, right? But the thing is, yesterday there was already a negotiation, right? Roger Wilkins, he was actually part of this deal. He was actually an insider who actually attended this meeting. But the thing is, you know, skepticism is growing from both sides because none of these, you know, I mean, across the aisle, the only sentiment that's been left over after this initial meeting was nothing but a skepticism because, you know, no one was really fully convinced that there will be any practicality in terms of rallying behind the common cause and narrowing down their differences. Then this type of a tug of war would it be somewhat questionable to eventually reach a meaningful conclusion, right? So, you know, some actually, you know, say that this would be just like, you know, drawing the line in the sand. You know, Joe Biden's first and meaningful approach to bipartisanship could possibly beget no meaningful consequence. It would be just like, you know, doing something silly, like pumping money down the drain, or, you know, just doing something meaningless. It's still really nothing less than a sidekick that would get someone nowhere. Because it would actually be portrayed as a breeze to nowhere. Unless, you know, he would eventually turn things around by gathering enough votes. By winning minds and hearts of Republican parties. That's what has been said. By the way, Roger Wilkins is really the Commerce, Science, and Transportation committee member who's been actually very much, you know, devoted to the infrastructure aspect of the legislature. Right? Right, infrastructure aspect of legislation, lawmaking policy, focusing on the commerce and science transportation by being part of the committee. But the thing is, you know, this Republican senator, he actually, you know, yesterday said that there will be no negotiation over the corporate tax. He's been very much appalled to hear this increase. The corporate tax rates would be a big no-no. So there will be no further compromise. Would that be a non-starter? That means that would be off-putting. It would immediately, you know, rain the parade. That there will be no further prospect for negotiation. That's really the thing. Republicans are pretty much adamant when it comes to taxation. There will be no single cent that would be more, which would eventually pressurize the American middle class. That's their policy. But the problem is, Joe Biden's infrastructure bill should require greater revenues. So in that way, America's airports and bridges and roads can be fixed and renovated. So they need to at least increase the amount of money that would be gathered, right? The nation's pulse strings should be enriched. The nation's wallet should be fattened. But the problem is, where could he find the source that might bring more money? What would be the golden egg laying goose? That's a problem. Well, Republicans, as you probably know, are really against the corporate tax. Corporate tax is really any type of tax that would be imposed on corporate entities. If you ever operate a company, then you might actually be burdened with the corporate tax. But if you ever hire, you know, more than 50 people, then you would actually experience a tax discount like this. But, you know, many mega corporates, they're actually already bombed with the corporate taxes. But in the United States, you know, the state of Delaware normally promises the lowest corporate tax in the United States. That's really the reason even actually Warren Buffett, in the first place, founded his company in Delaware. Delaware, if you ever actually attended the economic class 101, Econ 101, then you would actually notice that Delaware normally, traditionally, had the lowest corporate tax. It's really true. So it's a here and a non-starter. If you ever actually want me to explain what that is, non-starter is really a party pooper that would eventually dampen enthusiasm for compromise. Oh, is that really the game changer that would eventually, you know, change the mindset of Republicans who might be in the first place a little bit interested in this negotiation? Because you guys are so adamant on this issue. You guys never really want to change your mindset on or about the corporate tax rates, right? It's not really that difficult. Roger Wickens is a Republican senator who attended the negotiation yesterday. So he has very much well-informed. He has been very much well-informed of the situation, right? So he's really the person who was brought to this interview. The thing is, you know, Joe Biden is very much eager to at least, you know, find different sources that might fatten up America's wallet. The America's treasury should be enriched. In that way, they can actually bankroll many of infrastructure innovations and renovations, right? Because innovations means a new technology, right? And the renovations means America's, you know, old and run down roads and bridges or airports and terminals. Could it be revamped, right? Then this type of restructuring would be necessitated across the nation, but it requires a heck of money, right? Nothing can be done without money. Ka-ching, you see dollar signs there, right? But the thing is, where is the golden egg laying goose? The problem is, where can you find the source of money to fund all these, you know, idealistic, you know, bills, right? But this, you know, in the first place, this is really very comprehensive and a broad brush bill, which is really $2.5 trillion infrastructure plan. Infrastructure plan. Some say it's a $2 trillion, but, you know, more specifically, the $2.5 trillion infrastructure bill that is really actually being negotiated. Yesterday, the very major meeting took place, right? He, you know, Roger Wilkins was actually part of this, you know, setting, so he actually, you know, he holds information privy to those attendees, right? Because he was a part of the deal. So, you know what, that's really the reason why he appears on TV right now, and he is currently being questioned with the barrage of questions, right? He's being bombarded with a barrage of questions right now. He's being interrogated by many journalists because he is a rare number of people who attended that event, right? In a nutshell, Joe Biden definitely needs to find, Joe Biden definitely needs to find sugar daddy, which it could actually eventually bankroll these infrastructure plans. But the problem is, this, you know, $2.5 trillion bill could never be substantiated without finding any sources for revenues. Then what is the greatest way to at least accumulate more of a wealth from the standpoint of a nation's treasury? A stricter tax policy. Literally, you know, demanding more money from corporate entities or corporates. That's probably the easiest solution, right? If you ever actually, you know, pressure more of the middle class, then this would be, resulting in very gloomy numbers for your approval ratings, right? But anyway, as far as I know, the Joe Biden campaign team back then was also very honest about more of a taxation burdened by America's middle class too, at the very beginning. But the thing is, Republicans are pretty much reluctant to hand out their approval for anything that might start with a C, the corporate tax. Really against the notion of raising more taxes. That could be applied to corporates, right? And corporations and companies. That means that there should be no more additional tax burden shouldered by America's company, because this would be the greatest way to kill off jobs. Then companies would definitely seek additional departure. This would be the beginning of a mass exodus. You're actually killing more job places by sending America's companies out of this country. Like, that's really their argument. So right now, it's a non-starter. Jim Shooter asked the question. You know, raising corporate tax is really a non-starter for negotiation. That means, you know, if that would be the underlying condition, then would that be a killjoy? That would root out any possible chances for negotiation between the Republican Party and the Joe Biden administration. So, you know, because of, you know, many of tough issues or hot potatoes like corporate taxes, many people really doubt the possibility of this bipartisan efforts. So, you know, some say that, oh, Joe Biden is really drawing the line in the sand. That means that he's actually doing certain work of a futility. It would be so useless because, you know, eventually he would get nowhere. Think about how pointless this might be. Do you really honestly think that any sound-minded Republicans would ever accept this type of proposal? You know what? Republicans are really against increase in tax burdens undertaken by companies. This corporate tax raise is a big turn-off and non-starter. That would eventually, you know, quench any desire from the GOP to have a negotiation with the administration in a meaningful sense. It's very easy for me. Non-starter, I mean, you know, Jim Shooter asked the question, do you really think that this would be immediate immediate turn-off or a game changer that would kill off the negotiation? And would that immediately rob both the parties of any possibilities for negotiation? That was really the question. Non-starter. Because, you know, Republicans are that desperate to at least, you know, never back down on this big no for the corporate tax rates. So, you know, as long as there will be corporate tax rates on the paper, then are Republicans never gonna accept the deal? That's really the question. Can we actually, is it really safe to say that? Can we accept that condition? Because, you know, the Democrats can never actually move forward without actually conceiving a corporate tax rate. Think about it. Where would it be the possible sources for revenues? Because the Democrats definitely need to have more money that might be allocated to all different corners of the United States, right? If the country wants to be modernized and renovated, then there should be money, right? That's the problem. But the problem is, you know what, even Democrats are pretty much, you know, disappointed. They were actually equally frustrated, so, you know, from both sides across the aisle. And the sense of skepticism and the doubt is growing. You know, we can actually say that no one is just too optimistic about this approach. Both the sides, truly both the sides believe that there will be very much limited chances of the negotiation that could have truly hammer out a deal for this $2.5 trillion infrastructure bill. That means no one is really that much positive about it. Yeah. No, nach gestriger Verhandlung zwischen der Republikanischen Partei und der Republikaner und Demokraten, ja, I would rather say that, Republikaner und Demokraten, beide sind ziemlich skeptisch über diese Möglichkeit der aktuellen Verhandlung. Ja, dann das meinte die der gestrige Treffer war ein bisschen enttäuschend. Beide sind ein bisschen pessimistischer. Wenn es aktuelle Fähigkeiten zu schaffen, etwas Konstruktives gibt, das ist wirklich der Wahrheit. Diese Regierung definitiv mit Beute mehr Geld zu wirklich vollzustrecken, diese sozusagen 2,5 Billionen Infrastrukturplan, aber das definitiv fordert so viel Geld, oder? Ist das so? Ja. Das war ein Hauptgrund, warum beide Seiten nicht voll überzeugend davon. Die Republikanische Partei ist ganz gegen irgendetwas Zunahme in Steuererhöhung. Nicht Zunahme in Steuer. Corporate-Steuer, das meinte ganz im Gegenteil, die Steuererhöhung für Gesellschaften. Ja, Unternehmer und Gesellschaften. Right? Ist das so? Ja. I don't need to think about it. It's very easy. Ja, Corporate Steuererhöhung. Aber die Demokraten definitiv benötigen sie zu finden eine Quelle des Haushaltes. Ja, es gibt mehrere definitiv diese gigantische Infrastrukturpläne erfordert sich eine bestimmte Menge des Geldes. Aber Steuer ist die einzige Lösung. Eine einzige Lösung dafür, oder? Und eine manche immer noch bezweifeln sich, dass diese Anstrengung bei der Regierung ist wie ein Laufen im Sand. Eine Verlaufen im Sand. Eine Verlaufen im Sand, das meinte, diese wird sehr, sehr nutzlos und diese hatte sehr geringe Chancen zu realisiert werden. Das wäre in Englisch, drawing the line in the sand, aber im Sand verlaufen. Auf Deutsch ganz ähnlich, running in the sand. That means it wouldn't get to nowhere. It would be so useless. Yeah. Because, if I ever, can I actually, go back to English to explain it once more, and I would like to finish this one. Jim Shudo in the first place said that, yesterday's negotiation only confirmed their own differences between the Democratic Party and the Republican. Because there is a sense of skepticism growing from both the sides is only confirmed. Because, they can never actually narrow down their position, or they can never breach their disparities. Because they could not actually, see eye to eye on so many issues. That's a problem. They could never be on the same page on many issues. Especially, the Joe Biden administration definitely wants to raise the taxes, especially the corporate taxes. Because, to reach, And the multinational companies should be burdened with the proper amount they actually owe to American society, because they actually advantage. They capitalize on and take advantage on America's infrastructure and America's status in the global community. Then they actually pay down the due they owe to this society. Otherwise, this would actually be so meaningless. They earn this much, but they would only put down this little kind of argument. Like global corporations like Amazon and Facebook, or even other multinational companies that would also claim stakes in the United States. They put down too little in this community. They would have returned too little in contrast to what they earn. Then that's troublesome, and that's mind-boggling. So this administration definitely wants to hold them accountable by taxing them heavily, right? But Republicans think this would be a deal killer. This would immediately put a damper on any enthusiasm that might be felt by Republicans when it comes to working together with this administration. Oh, this would immediately be a killjoy. That would have robbed me of any modicum of a passion for this bipartisanship work. Corporate tax, no way, no how. That's really the prevailing sentiment amongst many Republicans. So that was the question. Is that really a non-starter for many Republicans? That was really the last question posed by Jim Sciutto. Non-starter. That means, because this is so off-putting that would eventually put the entire negotiation on the brakes. Yeah. That's really the question. Now, do I have to think about it? And then Roger Wilkins, he's been closely connected to the infrastructure bill because he's been actually serving his post in the Commerce and the Science and Transportation Committee, right? He's a Senate member from the Republican Party, and he was a part of the yesterday's negotiation, which is just still unfinished. Right? It's really undone and unfinished because, no proper consequence has been drawn from the yesterday's negotiation. Yesterday was, just a mere meeting. But, they actually thought that they could actually get one step closer to each other by engulfing their differences. However, this only confirmed their differences. Yeah, that was really the occasion for realizing how far they're away from each other. Yeah, unfortunately. And I have to go.